Hey everyone, welcome to KSSP Podcast. I'm Spencer,
I'm Katie.
and today our series video is gonna be about nutrition. So, with that, we're gonna be looking into a couple of different aspects, I guess, of nutrition. So, we'll be looking at sugar, fats, dairy, gluten, fiber, caffeine, vitamins and minerals, supplements, and then the Mediterranean diet.
So we'll be going over some of the basics of what they are, as well as how they each may potentially affect mental health and what foods they're in.
And while we're going to be mentioning what studies have shown on various mental health issues with nutrition and supplements, it's also important to understand that diet is a very individualized thing, and what has been shown to work for others may not work for you due to various individual factors. If you are able to work with a healthcare provider and or nutritionist, that will be the most helpful.
And we also understand that while changing diet can be a helpful and effective tool, it may not be achievable for a bunch of various reasons like cost, availability, time, etc.
So, to get started, we're gonna start with sugar. So, what is sugar? Well, sugar is a sweet-tasting, soluble carbohydrate.
There are simple sugars. Those are also called monosaccharides. And these are glucose, fructose, and galactose. So the atoms in fructose are bonded together in a different order than the glucose or galactose. This makes it a structural isomer. So glucose and galactose have atoms bonded together in the same order, but they are differently arranged in space. So this makes them stereoisomers. And glucose and galactose are aldoses, and fructose is a ketose. So an aldose is a simple sugar known as a monosaccharide. It has a carbon backbone chain with a carbonyl group on the endmost carbon atom, and this makes it an aldehyde, and hydroxyl groups connected to all the other carbon atoms. Aldolase is essential for the metabolism of fructose. Reactive aldehydes can impair cellular functions and exacerbate organ injury, acute pain, and inflammation, and they've been linked to cancer and cardiovascular disease. Meanwhile, ketoses have the carbonyl group away from the end of the molecule and are therefore ketones. So ketones are an alternative source of fuel for our body, and excess ketones upset the chemical balance of your blood, and if left untreated, can poison the body. Your body cannot tolerate large amounts of ketones and will try to get rid of them through the urine. Eventually, they build up in the blood.
And then there are also compound sugars, which are called disaccharides or double sugars. And they are molecules made of two bonded monosaccharides. An example would be, or some examples would be sucrose, which is glucose and fructose. There's lactose, which is glucose and galactose, and maltose, which is two molecules of glucose. And what does the body do with compound sugars? Well, in the body, compound sugars are hydrolyzed into simple sugars. And what is hydrolysis? It is the chemical breakdown of a compound due to its reaction with water.
So there's also corn syrup. We might be asking ourselves, what is corn syrup exactly, and is it worse for me than natural sugar? So corn syrup is a cheap source of sugar. It is industrially produced by converting corn starch into sugars such as maltose, fructose, and glucose. Independent of whether or not sugar in general influences obesity and weight gain, sucrose and HFCS have no significant, so HFCS, high fructose corn syrup, so those have no significant differences in their effects on the body. Before 1975, sucrose was the primary sweetener in processed foods, but since then, high fructose corn syrup is now the primary sweetener in processed foods due to its low cost.
And overall, we may be wondering, is sugar bad for me? Well, so the brain needs glucose, which is sugar, but it only needs 62 grams of it in a 24-hour period. So while sugar is necessary for the body to function, it is important to not take too much in. So moderation, it would be good there. Excessive consumption of sugar has been implicated in the onset of obesity, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and tooth decay. In 2015, the World Health Organization recommended that adults and children reduce their intake of free sugars to less than 10% and encouraged a reduction to below 5% of their total energy intake. Sugar refiners and manufacturers of sugary foods and drinks have sought to influence medical research and public health recommendations. And then the AHA, American Heart Association, suggests a stricter added sugar limit of no more than 100 calories per day, which is about 6 teaspoons or 24 grams for most adult women, and no more than 150 calories per day, which is about 9 teaspoons or 36 grams of sugar for most men. And then we're also going to be talking a little bit about sugar and how it may affect mental health. So to start, we're going to be looking at just sugar and depression. So there is evidence that eating too much sugar may increase the likelihood of developing depression. According to a meta-analysis, there is a correlation between eating sugar and having depression reported at 0.95. So the magnitude of the correlation coefficient indicates the strength. So we may be wondering kind of what that means, that number, that 0.95 means. And the magnitude of the correlation coefficient indicates the strength of the association. So for example, a correlation of R equaling 0.9 suggests a strong positive association between two variables, whereas a correlation of R equal to negative 0.2 suggests a weak negative association. And again, they reported their association at 0.95. But it's always important to note correlation versus causation. Whereas causation means one thing causes another. So in other words, action A causes outcome B. Correlation is simply a relationship where action A relates to action B. So that's just always important to understand when discussing anything that finds a correlational link. And then research has shown that consuming sugar-sweetened beverages increases the risk of depression, and the more sugar consumed, the greater the risk. Eating a lot of unhealthy processed foods can cause your brain to have too much glucose, which may lead to inflammation and may contribute to depression. Studies have found low levels of BDNF in women with depression. Well, what is BDNF? It is brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and it is a key molecule involved in plastic changes related to learning and memory. It helps the brain grow and develop and adapt to stress. And how does BDNF relate to sugar? Well, studies have shown high blood glucose levels linked to lower levels of brain-derived neurotrophic factor in rats. And research indicates that a diet high in added sugar reduces the production of BDNF. Without BDNF, our brains can't form new memories, and we can't learn or remember much of anything. And then I also wanted to just briefly talk about the glycemic index, because that also appears to be a risk factor for depression. So what is the glycemic index? Well, the glycemic index is a number from 0 to 100 assigned to a food with pure glucose arbitrarily given the value of 100, which represents the relative rise in blood glucose level 2 hours after consuming that food. So we're just going to briefly look here at some glycemic index charts from University Health News Daily. So we're going to start with the low glycemic index chart, which is 55 or less. So that is going to be some fruits. So apples are at 40 on the glycemic index, grapes at 43, Some vegetables, there's carrots, raw carrots at 35, tomato soup, 38. So for grains, breads, and cereals, chickpeas are 36. And then skim milk is at 32. Cashews are 25. And then ice cream, full fat, French vanilla is 38. And those were all on the low, which is 55 or less. And then we'll look at the medium glycemic index, which is between 56 and 69. So there we have cantaloupe, 120 grams at 65. We have pumpkin, 80 grams of pumpkin at 66. A white bagel is 69. A Nutri-Grain bar is 66. And then we'll look at the high glycemic index, which is 70 and higher. So watermelon at 100, so if you have 120 grams of watermelon, that's 80. A microwave potato is 93. We got, it looks like a lot of cereal brand, which I guess that's not that surprising. Cheerios, 30 grams of Cheerios is 74. Corn Flakes, 79. Rice Krispies, 82. And then French fries, 75. So yeah, those are just some, just again, so that we're aware, because the glycemic index, again, just shows how much and how quickly a carbohydrate containing food raises our blood sugar level. So the lower it is, the lower the effect.
Yeah, so we'll briefly talk about ADHD really quick. There's a common perception that sugar causes ADHD, but a large majority of recent studies back up the idea that sugar does not cause ADHD. So with that being said, we'll move on and talk about some artificial sweeteners. What is an artificial sweetener? Well, it's a sugar substitute. Well, sugar substitute is a food additive that provides a sweetness like that of sugar while containing significantly less food energy than sugar-based sweeteners, making it a zero-calorie or low-calorie sweetener. So some examples might be aspartame, sucralose, saccharin, or xylitol. And what about them? Well, science indicates that many artificial sweeteners may be linked to depression as well. And one study showed that people who consume artificial sweeteners, mostly through diet drinks, are more depressed than those who don't consume such beverages. And several studies have also demonstrated that artificial sweeteners can be toxic to the brain, altering brain concentrations of mood-regulating neurotransmitters. Aspartame specifically has been proven to be especially damaging. A review of studies on aspartame found that it increases substances in the brain that inhibit the synthesis and release of the neurotransmitters dopamine, noradrenaline, and serotonin. And this causes oxidation, which increases harmful free radicals in the brain, which can cause brain damage and render the brain more prone to depression. And then there's sucralose. There's just been a study that showed that sucralose significantly alters the gut bacteria in mice, increasing a type of bacteria that other studies show is increased in people who are depressed. And it's just important to be aware of the potential adverse effects of artificial sweeteners, because there is mixed information on it out there.
Oh, yeah. And that was what we had on sugar. So make sure to join us in the next episode where we go over fats. And as always, you can leave a comment below if you have any topic ideas you want to hear us talk about in future episodes.
You can reach out on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, as well as going to our Twitch. You can follow us there to see when we live stream.
And don't forget to give this video a like, as well as follow or subscribe to our other social media accounts and turn on notifications so that you get notified when our new content comes out. Otherwise, we will see you all in the next video.